Perform a strategic rollout, not a rollover. In this episode, I'm going to address the question, what should you do with a 401k before retiring? Get ready. You're going to be shocked and surprised with my advice. So I'm Doug Andrew, and I've helped people prepare for a comfortable retirement now for more than 4.5 decades. I've been so blessed in my career to educate thousands of people through my 11 books thus far, and this YouTube channel, Three Dimensional Wealth, is really about you and empowering you with knowledge and information. Now, a lot of people, as they approach retirement, oftentimes they've sort of had their head in the sand, so to speak, and they are about to retire, and it's open season now, and the IRS is hunting for you, and you've got to come out and deal with reality that this money that you've been accumulating in tax-deferred IRAs, 401ks, and the like, you're going to have to pay taxes on that. And so you oftentimes are surprised when you find out, wait a minute, if I pull out $100,000 a year out of my 401k portfolio, I'm only going to net about $70,000 to buy gas and groceries or prescriptions or golf green fees because you have to pay the tax. And if you can't get by on that, that means in a 33% tax bracket, you have to pull out 50% more money. You have to withdraw $150,000 out of a 401k, pay tax of a third between federal and state tax. In 41 out of 50 states in the United States, we have a state income tax, but you have to withdraw $150,000 to net $100,000 to live. And so this causes people to outlive their money, but there's another danger, it's market volatility. See, a lot of people accumulate their money in the market, and when they retire, they want predictable income streams, and Wall Street was never designed for you to actually sell. When you ask an advisor on Wall Street, when should I sell? And they will say, never. And so you have to begin to strategize so that you want to get the taxes over and done with, in my opinion, before retiring. This is a strategic rollout that I'm going to explain in this episode. Get the taxes over and done with in 5 years or maybe a little bit longer, and then enjoy tax-free income thereafter on as much of your retirement resources as you possibly can. So get ready to learn how to do that. So before I proceed to share with you some examples of what I call a strategic rollout, which is a term I coined years ago, let's make sure you understand the difference between a rollover and a rollout. See, a rollover, I often say, is like going from the frying pan into the fire. You're just simply continuing to defer and delay the inevitable, procrastinate paying the tax. When has procrastinating anything turned out good for you? It hasn't for me. So when you roll money over from a 401k to an IRA and you continue to defer, thinking that's the smartest thing to do because you're avoiding tax, you're not looking really at the impact over your entire lifetime from a tax standpoint. You continue to defer and delay, and then you are forced to take it out at age 72 now based upon your LE. LE is life expectancy. And then most advisors give you the poor, rotten advice to take RMDs. I think that's the worst advice oftentimes for retirees. And you'll understand why as I proceed here. So a rollover is continuing to defer and procrastinate. A rollout, you want to get the money out of those IRAs and 401ks sooner than later, strategically. And you're going to see how I usually do this over a 5-year period. Why? To basically get the taxes over and done with sooner than later. But it's what you do with the after-tax money that makes all the difference. So I'm going to share with you a strategy that I call a strategic rollout. It's, again, not a rollover, because, again, I think that is like going from the frying pan into the fire. But the reason why I advise many people at retirement to consider rolling the money out of a 401k, for example, is to get the taxes over and done with sooner than later. Get your money out of the market so that you are not subject to the market volatility and you cannot take predictable income out of an IRA or 401k portfolio that's invested in the market. So in answer to the question, what should you do with a 401k before retiring? I would recommend getting it out because I'm a skier, and I think that at the end of the day is when I notice most people breaking their legs and crashing and burning. And so retirement is sort of like at the end of the day. And I would recommend that maybe you ride the gondola down to the bottom to arrive there safely instead of risking crashing and burning by leaving your money into IRAs and 401ks, being clobbered with tax and also subject to market volatility. Does that make sense? So when we talk about a strategic rollout, I want you to stay with me to the end of this episode so that you can claim your free copy of my most recent best-selling book, The Laser Fund. It's over 300 pages of charts, graphs, explanations. But also subscribe. I post an in-depth answer to a financial question almost daily on this Three-Dimensional Wealth channel. Hit the notification bell and you'll be notified every time I post a new educational video. Now, a strategic rollout is where you're getting your money out of your IRAs and 401ks that are yet to be taxed over usually a 5-year period strategically. Depending upon the tax bracket you're in a given year or the room that you may have in a given tax bracket, and getting the taxes over and done with. And when I say strategically, maybe during years where your income was less, like in 2020, a lot of people, their income went down because of COVID-19. They were laid off or whatever. And so there's times when you ought to take money out and get the taxes over and done with sooner than later. You could access up to $100,000 out of an IRA or 401k in the year 2020 because of the COVID-19 pandemic and not pay a 10% penalty, even if you were under the age of 59 and a half. So a good tax advisor will help you understand how to roll it out. But I've usually done it over a 5-year period. I'm going to give you examples of this. And then you invest or reposition the net after-tax money into something that's going to be tax-free from now on. Okay? And people say, well, what's that? What's tax-free? Because most advisors say, well, what are you going to do? You're going to pay the tax, and then where are you going to put it? Into something that's tax-free from now on. And my favorite vehicle, which I call the Laser Fund, will actually blossom in value at the end of the day when you pass away, reimbursing you sometimes many-fold what you paid in tax during the rollout process. And so oftentimes I've helped many people offset the tax during the rollout by resurrecting or creating new deductions that they didn't have before. So I'm going to give you some examples of how I've done this. So with a strategic rollout, I want to give you some examples of how I've done this for people to save hundreds of thousands of dollars of unnecessary tax. I remember two school teachers, both the husband and wife taught school for years, and they had money in the state's 401k, 403bs, tax-sheltered annuities. And when they came to me, they had about $250,000 at the time, which was a lot of money back then, in yet to be taxed accounts. And their advisor had told them, oh, if you don't need the money, continue to defer. Now, they had just passed age 59 and a half, so they could access money without a 10% penalty. But see, their advisor was short-sighted. They said, oh, if you don't need the money, keep deferring until you're age 70 and a half. And back then, that's when they had to start withdrawing money or else they would incur a 50% penalty. So let's assume that the $250,000 in their 403bs and 401ks were earning about 7.2%, which is approximately what they were. That means it would double in 10 years by age 70 and a half to $500,000. Then I showed them with my software doing a strategic rollout compared to if they left it in the 401ks and 403bs. and taking RMDs, required minimum distributions, what the difference would be. They were shocked to see that if they took out the RMDs, the rest of the husband's life, and assuming he passed away first, and then the wife's lifetime, they would shell out at least $250,000 in taxes. And they went, what? I said, oh, I think it's going to be higher, really, because I think taxes will go up down the road. They go, well, golly. We never thought this would happen. So I showed them a strategic rollout. And in a nutshell, we reduced the tax from $250,000 down to $60,000. They said, wow, we like this, but golly, it's going to hurt. And I go, you know, you're going to pay tax sooner or later. We pulled out $60,000 a year over 5 years. That's a total of $300,000 because it was earning money, interest, as we were doing the rollout over 5 years. They ended up paying $12,500 a year in tax over 5 years. So they only paid $60,000 in tax instead of $250,000 by putting it off. Now, we actually offset the tax by resurrecting deductions on their house and their cabin and their condo. And so we reduced the tax down to $20,000 and actually down to zero. They were so happy because we got the $250,000 actually up to $300,000 rolled out with no tax consequence. We do this all the time. I've done it for a widower who ended up at age 70 and a half being told by his advisor, hey, just take out RMDs on $600,000 at a 4% payout was only $24,000. He had to pay $8,000 of that in tax, and he only netted $16,000 to buy gas and groceries and prescriptions and golf green fees. That's pretty pathetic. Instead, we did a strategic rollout, and we ended up getting $750,000 out because we were earning about 8% in the meantime. But we were able to offset the tax by resurrecting and creating new deductions on his rental properties. So we successfully got $750,000 out of his IRAs and 401ks over a 5-year period. It was generating rates of return of 8 to 10%. 8% on $750,000. That's $60,000 a year of tax-free income versus the $16,000 after-tax income out of his 401ks. Boy, was he ever happy. We do this all the time. We had a husband and wife, both physicians. They had $4.6 million in their 401ks. They were going to have to pay tax if they strung it out of at least $2.6 million. Their advisor said, they can afford $2.6 million. I said, well, let's ask them. I wasn't able to save them all $2.6 million. We only saved them $1.2 million. They are so grateful because that $1.2 million of otherwise payable tax is funding their family bank, generating $100,000 a year of tax-free cash flow for their grandchildren and then great-grandchildren for college funding, for military service, religious missions, all kinds of humanitarian experiences that they want to have for their family. Folks, this is so dynamic. We took a couple in California from the highest tax bracket to a 0% tax bracket in 5 years. They now have $8 million generating between $600,000 to $800,000 a year of tax-free cash flow. They don't even need that much. The most they have taken out is $300,000 tax-free. The rest is just growing. You can do this too. So as people ask, golly, what should I be doing with my 401ks and the like before retiring? In this episode, I've admonished you to get the taxes over and done with sooner than later and reposition the net after-tax monies into something that's going to be tax-free from now on. So let me connect the dots. I firmly believe that most people are way too top-heavy at retirement in yet-to-be-taxed IRAs and 401ks, and the money's usually invested in the market. What am I recommending? Get the money out of the market, create predictable cash flow. You cannot get predictable cash flow when your money's in a volatile market. You move it out. You do a strategic rollout and put it where? I would recommend that you put it into a tax-free bucket and not a Roth, not municipal bonds. I've outperformed what municipal bonds earned for years by using the Laser Fund. So in the Laser Fund, you're able to move money and create tax-free income. So let me just cut to the chase. Many couples who came to me and said, golly, we have enough assets, 2 or 3 or 4 million, to generate very comfortably $200,000 of income in our retirement years. And I go, way to go. But I see a problem here. And they go, what's the problem? I said, well, it's all showing up on the front of your 1040 tax return. And they go, well, you mean there's a way to avoid that? I go, yes. Now, I have to cure that tax dis-ease, because when you're not at ease physically, that's called disease. But a lot of people are not at ease financially because of the amount of tax they're going to pay. So by doing a strategic rollout in 5 years, I've successfully taken many people from paying tax on $200,000 of income down to only paying tax on half that, or even $80,000 of that. In other words, in 5 years, we've transferred $120,000 of annual income off of their tax return because it's coming out of their Laser Fund, the tax-free bucket. I would love to gift you a free copy of my most recent best-selling 300-page book, The Laser Fund, which is actually 2 books in one. I'll tell you what, I will pay for the book. You go to laserfund.com, it's on the screen here, and claim your free copy. You contribute a nominal amount towards the shipping and handling. I'll cover the rest of that cost, and I will send out a book to you. There's also options there for you to listen and learn and watch and learn. But here's to your brighter future.